a kind of turning moment in the history of the globe, potentially, not only this part of Europe. So I think this jeopardy is very, very real. Russia has summoned the worst demons of the 20th century: imperialism, colonialism, and nationalism, and these are foundations of their system of Ruski Mir, as Putin and the Kremlin call it, and this is a very dangerous system.
Are you seeing intimidations? We saw some Russian jets being intercepted in airspace very close to the borders. Are you seeing more and more of that?
Absolutely. Well, like we see more and more of those provocations, and they are very visible. But I tell you what is not so visible, and it's very dangerous for France, for Poland, for the whole of Europe. This is the Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda is enormous. It's difficult to imagine for people in France and in Spain and in Germany how effective it is, how overwhelming it is, and it may be. Russians are investing a lot in fake news, in social media, in propaganda, and this is the weapon of the modern war as well.
Right. You mentioned, and President Zelensky here in Munich urged his allies to speed up weapons deliveries. There was a debate about tanks. We heard the German Chancellor saying, well, we are now okay for Leopard tanks, but it seems many countries who said they would send them are not sending them, really. I mean, is this an issue now that, although there is an agreement in principle, in practice those tanks are not reaching Ukraine?
Well, of course, theory or principles, agreements have to go in tandem with practice. And I remember my talks with Chancellor Scholz from December, when I was trying to persuade him to...
It was difficult.
It was very difficult back then, but I prefer to see both glass half full rather than half empty. And I'm grateful that Germany eventually decided to send the Leopard tanks, very modern tanks, to Ukraine. Now we are in the process of talking to the others, to the Norwegians, Danes, Finnish government, to ask them to be part of this coalition as well. Because this is not only a general and theoretical agreement, but also a practical realization of this move. Poland is ready to give our 14 Leopard tanks, which are, by the way, on top of more than 300 tanks which we would have delivered already, and we are in the process of delivery to Ukraine. Some of them are quite modern tanks, so there's no other country in the world which would have delivered more tanks than Poland delivered to Ukraine. So I do believe that this coalition of Leopard tanks countries will come to terms pretty quickly, and the tanks are going to be sent to Ukraine.
What about fighter jets? This is the new issue. You have F-16s, around 50 of them. You're much more cautious than on tanks. You say it has to be a NATO decision. There's also the option of Poland sending MiG-29 jets to Ukraine. Where are you standing on this issue?
We have a very little number of modern F-16 fighter jets, as you said, and we have MiGs. So Poland can be a coalition of fighter jet countries to be delivered to Ukraine, but we are now prepared to deliver our MiGs, and not on our own, not alone, but as part of a bigger move, of a bigger coalition. And yes, it's very important because Russians are dominating in the air, and even if more and more rockets and missiles and bombs are not reaching their targets because of the anti-aircraft systems, but the disproportion between Ukraine and Russia with regard to all the aircraft fighters and so on, it's so huge that Ukraine should be supported in this area.
So you will send MiGs rather than F-16s?
Not immediately, only as part of a bigger coalition, as I said.
What are the sanctions against Russia? There's supposed to be a new round of sanctions. You have said many times that it's not enough because the sanctions are not biting the Russian economy as people expected it would.
This is why I was probably first prime minister in Europe who said that there has to be seizure of Russian assets, the Russian Federation assets and assets of the Russian oligarchs.
But that's not accepted.
Not yet, but many countries are talking positive language more and more about this. And if there was such a decision by the European Commission, for instance, or such a stimulation coming from the European Commission, more and more countries would have to be in agreement, would need to be, would be able to agree with such an approach.
Is this
It's very
realistic?
important. Well, this is very important to realize this, because this would mean also that the aggressor country is bearing very direct responsibility for all the losses and damages created by their troops. So I'm a very strong proponent of this move. Here you have, sir, 400 billion euro hanging in the air, low-hanging fruit, as they say, and we should take it, and we should use it for two purposes. We should use it to rebuild Ukraine, its energy infrastructure, hospitals bombed by the Russians, kindergartens, and so on. But also we should use it to reduce the bills for gas and energy across Europe, because this is a direct consequence of Russian attack on Ukraine, this Putinflation, as we say, very high inflation across Europe. So here you have 400 billion euro. Why not to use it? Let's be brave and let's work towards appropriate legal solutions.
We've been hearing the French President Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz repeat for months that there's a need to keep open channels with Vladimir Putin. Do you think that they are changing their stance on this very issue?
Why do so many Australian children need help today? We ask the people.